What are the big evidence gaps? I mean, from the perspective of the team that I work with, right, which is the poverty team, we are very people focused, right? I mean, the question that ultimately drives our work is who are the poor, where are they, what are the problems, how can we solve them? So when we think about evidence gaps and sort of data gaps, we really look at that issue, from that perspective. And what we know is that there are still many countries in the world where we really don't have an answer for those questions because we don't have household surveys, and therefore we can't even say, how many poor households are there, right? We know how to look at households, but we have a much harder time looking within households, right? So when you start thinking about differences between men and women, differences between children, adults, and elderly people, we really don't have a very good understanding.
I think there's still a lot of challenges in terms of how you handle the impact of changing poverty. Children drop in and out of poverty, as do adults, and one of the difficulties is that very often tracking the inputs and outputs, if you like, the dropping in, dropping out is quite difficult. So very often you think you found a solution, but in fact you still find children are not fulfilling their potential. And that's because poverty changes. It's not static. You're getting changes. It might be a crisis like drought or conflict, which impacts suddenly.
I think in the economic dimensions of child poverty, as distinct from, let's say, health or even education, we have greater challenges because economics hasn't traditionally looked at impacts of interventions for children. It's tended to look primarily at the household level, and therefore there isn't a great deal of evidence about whether and how children benefit from interventions like social protection, livelihoods, food security work, or even humanitarian interventions like food and cash provision in crises. So we have a big challenge there. I think probably more emphasis needs to be placed on highly localized research, which is highly informed by the people who are normally the subjects. In other words, the people whose lives are most affected and whose children's lives are most at stake. So participatory research, use of qualitative methods, tailoring program interventions quite strongly to the local context.
Let's go back to those social cash transfer. So we have demonstrated through those impact evaluation a lot of positive impact on reducing monetary and non-monetary poverty. However, there are a few areas where we do not have evidence, notably the impact on reducing stunting, malnutrition among children, and in terms of health outcome as well, it's very mixed. Now, of course, the first question is maybe those programs don't have an impact on those areas, which is not a bad thing, which simply means that you need to look at other type of interventions to have an impact. And that's as well fundamental because what we observe sometimes is that over-researching or doing too much research for the sake of research is not useful.
I think at a global level, there is an amazing window of opportunity right now, and I think much more commitment to a very holistic view of child poverty and children's development, which goes everywhere from, obviously environmental issues, which are so important, right the way through to, maternal education, all the multiple factors that should be considered when you're thinking about reducing child poverty are under active consideration through the SDGs. But I think aside from that, one of the slightly exciting and exhilarating but also frustrating things about working in this field is you never know when an opportunity is actually going to arise, and it's often very serendipitous and chance.
We have what we call the Commission on the Status of Women, and next year in New York the Commission on the Status of Women is on rural women and girls, and here in ECA, together with the UN Women and the African Union Commission, we do have what we call Commission on the Status of Women preparations, where we bring the ministers of gender to look at the issues.
Especially, we have monthly meeting, which is called Child Research and Practice Forum. It is monthly seminar. This is many organizations working on children join on that seminar, and we share experience, and we identified gaps, and also we put the way forward, how we are working together by reading each other, to avoid duplication of effort, and also to use our technical support appropriately. And this monthly seminar is very important for our ministry and as well as for our partners, because it is the floor that everyone comes with his idea, with his research, with his gaps. Then we put everything on that discussion, agreed, and move together.
In my ideal world, in my dreams, the governments would actually themselves take the funding forward, because they would then be able to make it much more specifically tailored to their particular interests and needs. I think that's actually quite difficult to achieve, because they have their own nationally representative data. They have already commitments to very large-scale data gathering, survey processes, and so on. So I'm not sure whether that's actually practical.
That children are still an afterthought, that budgets, policies, laws, major political decisions are taken without reference to today's children and the children of generations to come, and I think that has to be challenged. There are very few political entities and administration in the world which mandate their civil servants to conduct assessments of the potential impact of political and policy decisions on children. And I think that should be routine and systematic in all national and subnational administrations. In other words, policymakers, both in civil service and at the political level, need to be thinking about the impacts and also adjusting the design of laws, budgets and programs to reflect what children are saying about how they're affected by them.